underway, and I think full credit to Neha to ensure everything's in place. Some of the challenges have been what time zones should we work with, and we found there really isn't one suitable time for all our community members across the world. So we're I think for the first one we've decided to go with the United States and Asia, and subsequently, the next one will probably be more Europe, Middle East favoring time zones. So look forward to more on that front. You think you should get going, Neha? Cool, nice. So I'm gonna start off, and like Neha said, I'm gonna speak for about 20 minutes, and share a bit about, give you guys a little bit of background on what's been happening in the distributed economy. From there, we'll go into um, specifics of what Sacred Capital is doing. And as we all know, people who are joining into this virtual interaction have been very curious about specifically what Sacred Capital is doing, because they've been hearing about these interactions, they've been watching them remotely, but this is the first time where you guys will be able to dive in, jump in, and interact with us as we lay out these specifics. um, so I'm going to start off with literally a 30-second background into distributed ledger technology and blockchains, and that's because I think most people here on this interaction are aware of it. As we all know, blockchain technology, obviously got famous with cryptocurrencies over the last few years, offered us a paradigm where maintenance of a ledger could be done in a low-cost, distributed manner, as opposed to in the past, where a large intermediary like a bank or a government or a large tech company had to maintain a ledger for us. And so, because of this distributed technology, we now have ways in which any small network of people, any individual, any institution, irrespective of scale, can maintain an immutable ledger, a ledger and on which they can count anything. In the past, especially in 2017, we've seen how these ledgers have been used for traditional businesses, so maintenance of land records or bank records, running a currency. Um, and 2017 has shown us how this technology could be used for existing businesses. That's typically how disruption occurs, because we apply new technologies to existing ways of doing things. But what the question that Sacred Capital has explored over the last 6 months has been, where is this really taking us? And that's something I'd really like us to dive into. And for that, we need to understand the holy trinity of computing. And this is, for those with technical backgrounds, this is pretty common knowledge. But there's kind of like a holy trinity, three pillars of technology: computing, networks, and storage. Um, in the past, computing, until the 1980s, with the revolution, with the personal computing revolution, computing was an extremely uh, centralized bit of technology. And so only when we had the personal computer come in the 1980s did we see, computing actually get accessed by people across the world. And so today we're at a place where, most of us have 4 or 5 computing devices at any point of time. Networks were highly centralized until the internet, and it's only until the 1990s that everyone could start broadcasting and communicating with each other, because until then it was about the printing press, the radio, television station, or using the snail mail to write letters to via the post office. What has distributed ledger technology really done? It's given us distributed storage, and by this I mean immutable distributed storage, which means anyone, like I said, or any network community now has the power to provide their users or their community members immutable storage. In the past, like I said, a government would maintain our land records because a government would not tamper with them. Facebook maintained our intimate photos because we thought, we believe that large institutions aren't vested in tampering with them. But now with distributed ledger technology, this, similar to what the internet or the personal computing revolution did, we now have the power of immutable storage storage provided to anyone. And that is a pretty big revolution, not in itself, but when we place it in this puzzle of the Holy Trinity, which is computing, networks, and storage. And so, where is this really taking us? We say we're moving towards of fragmented microeconomies. And so, when you think about an economy, there's basically three layers to it. So, I'm a resident of Singapore, and as you know, a resident here, there's financial capital that I engage with, which is the Singapore dollar. There's a reputation system, which is a certain set of rules and regulations which the Singapore government lays down. And there's a framework which defines these rules, which is the governance. In this case, it's democracy. And so what we're trying to say is, instead of blockchains and distributed ledger technology, they're not just giving us cryptocurrencies or faster startups, they're allowing individuals to run their own economies, or groups of people to run their own economies. And that is a pretty big deal, because that's a paradigm we haven't really explored. And so the buzzword, or the way to frame this best, is to say we're moving towards open source economies. And when we enter an open source paradigm, it's basically a paradigm where groups of people can get together and start innovating in fantastic new ways, which means we're now going to see diverse designs for economies come about. Why is this a big deal? It's a big deal because in the past, economies were run by nations. You had to be a large institution in order to run an economy. And so design of an economy was largely monolithic, was largely homogeneous. And so one Singapore dollar was designed kind of the same way as the United States dollar, which is why there was complete transferability between the two. With 5,000 Singapore dollars, I could buy certain kinds of value. I could buy maybe a small car, and I could also buy a car or a house or food or pay my rent with the United States dollar. And so there was just one design for money. Now then, moving to this open source paradigm, we're seeing these fantastic, diverse designs for money come about. And this isn't a strange concept. This has been part of our life already. It's just that designs for wealth were limited to large institutions. So, like I said, a government ran its reputation system, and so if you were part of a country and were a good citizen, you were considered worthy of credit. You had different benefits that could be provided to you, and so that was a form of wealth, not just the number of dollars you had in your bank account. My Fitbit data, which shows that I exercise regularly and that I generally live a healthy life, is actually a form of wealth. If I was a Lyft driver, my Lyft driver rating is a form of wealth apart from the money that I receive from Lyft. So if I'm a 4-star driver, I do receive benefits with it, which is greater visibility within the ecosystem, higher number of rides, maybe even some peer-to-peer financing. There's also other kinds of reputation that exist in a group of friends or a community. If I'm considered someone trustworthy, that is form of social capital. It is a form of wealth. Now, in the past, we've never really considered this money because, number one, it had to be run by large institutions, because who's going to trust if Sid made an app and it had 5 people on it, who's going to trust a rating that the app issued, because Sid could be tampering with that app rating at any point of time. If Sid decided to run a country with 7 people, it's not really trustworthy, right? Like, what is that reputation system that the country assigned to people? So you have to be a large institution to be creating this kind of an economy. And secondly, any reputation was limited to that ecosystem. So my Lyft driver rating is limited to Lyft. I can't go outside of Lyft and access different benefits with it. And that's what these technologies are bringing about, because of immutable storage, my Lyft rating, one could sit on an immutable ledger, which means it's now accessible for anyone to provide benefits to this Lyft rating. And so that's why we say there's network effects playing out on these different kinds of value, which weren't possible earlier. If you think about it, 100 or 120 years ago, nation states created immutability around money. And so if my money is lying in a bank account, it can't be tampered with. It can't be taken away without due democratic process. And so as a result of that, network effects started playing out. And so if I, go to an institution and try and pay Singapore dollars, it's actually accepted by many institutions, and that's because it's immutable. And so what we're saying is now that reputation and all of these other kinds of wealth sit on distributed ledgers, the network effects are starting to play out in them. And that's why immutability is giving birth to network effects. Um, so, summary from all of this: distributed ledgers are broadening our definition of wealth. We're now going to see different kinds of wealth, different kinds of value become money. And number two, because we're there, it's open source, we're going to see different designs of money. So and Uber's design for reputation may not be the same for Lyft. And so that's creating it's an exciting new possibility, but it's also leading us into a pretty confusing paradigm. And that's where sacred capital comes in, because sacred capital helps you navigate this economy, helps you also build in this economy. And so how do we do it? It's essentially a three-pronged approach. At the base of it all is this reputation interchange. Think of this as a social fabric that wraps around different apps, different institutions, different kinds of value creators, and it allows these differently designed wealths to be transferred from one network to another. And so most of you would have heard about us using the word reputation economy, and that's basically been the buzzword through all our interactions. This is why, because think of this as the economic backbone that allows different economies to speak to one another, to port across one another. Two, there's obviously entrepreneurs, app creators, institutions, people who are running movements who will use this economic backbone to plug in and plug out. Like it's not an exchange, it's an interchange, as we call it. And third, there's obviously users who would use sacred capital to ensure that their reputation across networks is being ported effectively. They use this as a dashboard to ensure that their wealth, their money in the distributed economy is truly aligned with them. So I'll run through these real quick. And to understand the reputation exchange, we need to understand the four basic tenets of the reputation economy. And some of this is drawn upon by Gandhian economics. Some of it is drawn upon through distributed economics over the last 4 to 5 years. This has been part of the work that we've done, and we've been able to utilize some of these tenets of distributed economics to create this reputation economy. So the four basic rules of the reputation economy are such. Number one, it's linked to identity. And so if Sid is a good Lyft driver, he can't transfer this to his brother or his friend. That would be absurd, because it's an indicator of how good a driver I am. It's not fungible, which means if Sid is a good Lyft driver, he can't go to an exchange or a bank and exchange it for money, because there would be no validity in that rating. It's monetizable but not fungible. So if I'm a good Lyft driver, I can monetize it by getting more rides, getting longer rides, getting greater tips, etc. But I can't trade it necessarily. And so that's rule number two. Rule number three is that diversity is actually celebrated in the reputation economy. So traditionally, because efficiency was important, and we needed money to be converted, one Singapore dollar to be converted to £1 and $1 and so on. We needed one design and we needed homogeneity. But in the reputation interchange, you actually celebrate different designs. So, for example, the way Lyft rates its drivers might say, Sid is a 4-star out of 5. And Uber might use different rules, and Uber might use a different scale. It might say, we're not going to use stars, we're going to use integers. And so say it is a 71. It might use a binary and say it is a good driver or not a good driver. And you actually allow this in the reputation economy, because this is important like I said, diversity is important. So we're not looking for one rating of a good driver or a good friend or an empathetic person. You're actually saying, let's have as many different ratings as possible. How are you doing on time? Yeah, I saw you pop up, so I thought maybe this is
No,
a
we're
good
good. We're
time.
good. I wanted you to just address an important question that came up because without that, maybe the whole picture
Okay.
is clear, which is, can you define mutability and immutability a little more specifically, so that the next step gets
Okay.
cleared out well.
Got it. Immutability means you can't change a certain bit of data or information unless the rules around it are fulfilled. So a DBS bank can't edit my bank account details unless I, send them a request, or there's, a certain set of rules that are fulfilled. Maybe I've been guilty of fraud and the government needs to seize my assets. So unless there's those rules are fulfilled, it can't be tampered with, and that's what allows us to trust that data and allows network effects to play in. And so when we say any kind of information is immutable, um, we say it needs to go fulfill a certain set of rules before it can be changed. It's not to say that it can never be changed. It's just that these rules need to be fulfilled. Hope that answers the query. So we'll go back to the reputation interchange. And so there's four rules to the reputation economy. Number one, it's linked to identity. It's number two, it's not fungible. Number three, we celebrate diversity. And number four is what I'm personally most excited about. Um, it can be staked in a very interesting way. And to me, this is the equivalent of the way investing works in the distributed economy. So those of you who joined in, who've seen Sacred Capital and, they're talking about how can I invest in the new economy? This is how it works. Um, so I'll say, that, pay particular attention to what I'm about to say. Reputation can be staked on new initiatives. So if I'm new in Singapore, and I can see, Jayesh Bhai, who's been in Singapore for a while, is on here, and I go to him and say, Jayesh Bhai, what are the best five best coffee shops in the city? He might recommend five good coffee shops. He's lent his credibility to these five coffee shops. Now, if I visit these five coffee shops and think they're fantastic, his reputation in my lens rises. His coffee connoisseur reputation in my lens rises. If not, it drops, right? And so reputation can be staked to power up or power down. And what's cool about it is this is not a zero sum economy. And so Jayesh could recommend this to me. He could recommend it to 20 of his friends. He could go online and tweet it to a million. And so the rules of the material economy don't apply to the reputation economy. That's why we say it's so suited for this distributed or virtual economy. And so what does that mean? If I had $1 million, I could only invest $1 million. I'm limited by the material, by its material aspects. However, with the distributed economy, I can lend my credibility. I can stake it on innumerable instances. However, the consequences of that staking come back to me. And so, Sacred Capital's reputation interchange through the staking protocol allows one kind of wealth to be converted to another. And so entrepreneurs, like I said, we'll talk about this a little more. It could be governments, it could be app creators, it could be people, driving conversations, movements. It could be people, firmly in the virtual economy, for information sharing, would use this reputation interchange to ensure that their users, their community members receive, network effects for their reputation. And third, users would use us to ensure that all these different apps and communities and institutions they're part of, their reputation, their wealth across these communities is aligned with them. And that's why we say that it's a three-pronged approach. So the reputation interchange, there's entrepreneurs, and there's users. So let's jump into, we have about 10 minutes left. And so let's jump into use cases, because this we found is what, really helps make this a lot more tangible for people. Um, these are use cases that have come over through, the last 9 months, over, all these thousands of people who participated in these interactions. And so I'll share a bit more. I'll share a few, ones that stuck out for us. Take let's take the example of an app or a community that is focused on wellness or fitness. As of now, if I was an app creator and I wanted to, attract and bring in the healthiest people in my locality, I had to kind of build it myself. And that's what the problem was. Like in the past, reputation, there was no formal economy for reputation, which is why I actually had to go and find these healthy people, these influencers, and invite them into my platform, manually, but, reward them with different benefits. But through the reputation interchange, I could actually import fit people, maybe through their Fitbit data, maybe through other communities that have tracked reputation. And from day one, I can actually give greater benefits to people who fit these specific criteria. Why is this important? Because as an entrepreneur, I can now scale this very specific kind of fitness, which in the past took organizations years to scale. Right? Like we always said, it's easy to scale the hard stuff. It's really tough to ensure the soft stuff gets preserved through scale. But through the reputation interchange, you can actually import and modulate this behavior in a much more controlled fashion. We're seeing this being tried out with people who are exploring peer-to-peer financing, and so you could import reputation to people who have been good with their finances in the past. We're in conversations with the government that wants to utilize this to create a reputation citizen economy for its citizens. And so in the past, this government has only had data on below poverty line or above poverty line, kind of data on its citizens, but now they can import different reputations and start providing benefits in a very, very different way. More importantly, this government can now create these reputations and plug it back into the reputation exchange, which means that citizens can now, being a specific kind of citizen isn't just reward from the government. There might be 50,000 other apps that are also providing you benefits. And so that's what Change would do. There's an organization in LA, I'm not sure if they're on Dashboard.Earth, that is looking at creating earth credits, and so rewarding people who would refuse plastic, while ordering food online or visiting a Starbucks. And so those earth credits would be, that's how an app would plug into the reputation exchange, app like Dashboard.Earth. So basically, an app can import reputations and export reputations, ensuring that they can actually scale social capital. They can actually modulate behavior within the ecosystem in a much more precise and controlled manner than before. Another use case that we're exploring with a bunch of people are, those who want to give shape to movements. Now, in the past, a movement like Pride, a movement, obviously like feminism or working towards the environment, they've had to resort to the traditional economy for sustenance, and that's because you had one design for economics. And even movements, if you cared about the environment, the only way you could sustain that or scale that effort was to sell solar panels, or advertise, provide CSR advertising for your local corporates on in your initiatives. But now, because of the reputation economy, it doesn't actually need sustenance on the fiat level. It doesn't need sustenance on the material level. You can actually build reputations, and you provide these reputation scores to people within your ecosystem itself, and that in itself is benefit. So a popular example that came up in London was the feminists might look at this and say something like, the Me Too movement needs a more nuanced discussion. And so you could create a community in which very specific, highly qualified people on the topic get greater voices in an ecosystem. However, something like the Women's March is a more generic movement and actually doesn't need to reward the high quality voices. All what you need is people who are willing to spend a Saturday afternoon and come to the Women's March. A very popular example that came up in our ecosystem was the floods in India last week, 2 weeks ago. And through this, you could create a reputation which had very high time decay, and so was just alive for just 10 days or so. But within it, you had the highly reputed people, or people who were on the ground getting maximum voices within this ecosystem. So movements, conversations can get legs through this reputation economy as well. The third case is understanding how this is more suited for the virtual economy. Fundamentally, if you think about it, information is struggles to fit on the material economy. And that's because fundamentally, information thrives well when shared. Information has very little material footprint. And so in the past, open source movements, sharing initiatives have been limited because they've struggled to find perfect validity in the material economy. Think about the Me Too tag that was created by someone all those months ago. It Somebody went in and typed hashtag Me Too for the first time, and the reason it picked up in popularity because people resonated with it, but there was no one profiting off it. If someone was earning a cent every time someone used hashtag Me Too, we would have really struggled to see it, going out and resonating with so many people. And so that's why we say it's more suited for the virtual economy because these kinds of economies work on resonance, and that means people can align with these ideas and these informational values, this information value without necessarily profiting from it. But at the same time, it assigns reputation to people contributing. And that's why we say, it also provides credit to those who are participating in these movements. So fundamentally, information doesn't work well with zero sum game kind of situations, and which is why reputation, like we discussed, isn't a zero sum game, and therefore much better suited for the informational economy. Um, Moving on, for those who've been interested in what our plan of action is over the next 6 to 9 months, we thought of just sharing our timeline because it allows you guys to engage with us. I'm going to wrap up in the next 2 to 3 minutes, and then we can open it up for questions that are coming through. But before we do that, I'll just share, what our timeline is and what we're going to do over the next 6 to 9 months. As you all know, over the last 9 months, we've been out on the road. We've done interactions in North America, in Europe, in the UK, in South Asia, Southeast Asia, China. And that effort is going to continue. Obviously, we're going to experiment with formats like these, but the intention is to create a community of entrepreneurs and individuals around this. And so, over the next 6 months, we're actually going to open this out to Genesis entrepreneurs. Give me a sec while I pop the polling screen away. Sorry about that. Genesis entrepreneurs basically think of them as the foundational entrepreneurs who build on our reputation interchange. Because as we know, network effects are important for the reputation interchange to take off. It's important that the first, we thought of 45 to 50 entrepreneurs come from very diverse backgrounds to truly showcase what the reputation economy can fulfill. And so we've been out on the road speaking to these different Genesis entrepreneurs. Like I said, some of them are governments, some of them app creators, some of them people who are looking to build movements or conversations. The intention over the next 6 months is to work with these people who will create these diverse sets of value. And at the end of these 6 months, in March 2018, these Genesis entrepreneurs will receive foundational reputational scores on our platform when it goes live. And so when this platform goes live, these Gen entrepreneurs will have created the Genesis reputations. And so this is kind of like a fundraise, but with social capital. And so that's why we say this is, reputational capital raise over the next 6 months. And that's what we're going to do from September now until March 2018. And in March 2018, we anticipate that we'll be able to switch the engine on and go live, and that's when we'll be able to roll out on underlying partners. Holochain is what we're expecting. We're using to build some of these to build our reputation interchange out. So how can you engage? Before we leave, open out to Q&A. Genesis entrepreneurs. If you're interested in building a movement, interested in building out an app, interested in building out, some kind of platform or community, please talk to us. It's we're also inviting people who not been traditional entrepreneurs, because like we said, even if you're building a movement or a conversation, you can plug into this. You could be utilizing any social network. You could be using our front end as well, and so where you could if there's anything that you're passionate about creating and you want to give shape to, this is where you need to plug in. If you're primarily mathematically inclined or quantitatively inclined, you can come and join in and test this reputation fabric with us, because it's as much as possible we're looking to model this reputation interchange as almost like a fabric. So if there is, when someone stakes their reputation on this fabric, there is a ripple effect which ripples out into different apps and also feedback into the originating app. And so it's almost like we're quantifying the surface of a liquid, surface of water. And if that's what you're interested in, we're opening this out to the community to come forward and test this with us. And obviously, we'd love for you to support us. As some of you know, our token economy is going to be released. Details of a token economy are going to be released really soon. We're going to be doing our issuance shortly. And so people who want to host, interactions like this for us, join these interactions, or maybe just support us financially. That's also an opportunity for you to do from the sidelines. So Neha, that's I'm gonna wrap up and open it up to you, and maybe we can keep it more interactive. We could discuss the poll or any other questions that might be coming up right now.
Okay, that was great. I'm good on time. Thanks.
Thanks.
I'd actually like to bring up, there were two questions that were asked by Mani, so I'm actually going to bring Mani live and sort of ask her to discuss the questions out.
Sure.
And Mani, you are now promoted to panelist, I think. Almost. Give me a second.
Is she on?
Yeah.
Or maybe you can read out a question while.
She says, I'm a Rotarian. I'm a Rotarian. There are about 1.2
There she is. No, she's on.
Okay.
Oh, she's on. You can.
Right.
Money.
He's on. Right.
I said, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Greetings from Bangalore. I loved your work.
Lovely.
And fantastic presentation out here. Two quick questions. When you said when it goes live in March 2018, and we are in September 2018, so I just want to understand the tense.
March 2019.
Oh, got it.
There was an error.
No issues.
Yeah.
No issues.
So the token economy goes live. The token issuance is really shortly, due in a few weeks. Whereas the network goes live March 2019. Sorry about that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, thanks for clarifying.
Your question.
I didn't want to make an assumption on your part. So the second question, I think this is fantastic. So little bit about, quick background about me. I've been in the Valley as a technologist for the last 20. Came back and did some interesting work on as an entrepreneur. Now I'm in building ecosystems. So to me, this is a fantastic ecosystem. I've been working with Pun and a couple of other people on the other aspects as well. So that's how I came to know about you. Moved by love and other whatnot. So anyway, a little bit of background. Two questions for you. One is, in terms of large early adopters, I see that you put out an entrepreneurs as one. You've not looked at NGOs or other people who are doing good. For example, Rotary, which I'm part of, it's a group of 1.2 million people, and they're doing fantastic work across the globe, and they may be a good early beachhead, so to speak. Have you considered those kind of models, or what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. And in some of our larger interactions, when we're meeting, physically, it allows us to get into this because we have the comfort of time. but I'll touch upon this, and those who are interested in this topic, we can take this discussion of post this. We can continue this maybe over email or one of the social networks. But in the past, money, we've had only like a binary language for value. Either you're for profit or not for profit, and that's because you just had one economic language for ascribing value, right? Like either you were a for profit or a not for profit. But the reputation economy allows you to break past that and actually tap into diverse designs for value. And so, relating to your question, the Rotary Club would fall very much into category number two, which is a movement. And by movement, I mean a group of people who have come together to do something. It might be creating funny memes, it might be sharing cat videos or good morning messages, it might be working for the local community, it might be towards a more long term goal. But especially something like communities like the Rotary, within this community, you've always had reputation, you've always had someone who's at the head of the hierarchy, someone who's serving, somebody who's for part of the administration or the governance. But we're now entering a world where some work like the Rotary could actually be done by much smaller groups. And what's important is the benefit that the community gives to its members doesn't need to be money. It can actually be reputation currency. And so money, if that answers your question to some extent, what you're talking about would fall firmly into category number two, because that's where I think organizations like the Rotary Club have always existed. So for example, if it is the Rotary Club running a beach cleaning movement, you can now initiate that movement, assign reputations for those who participate in the beach cleaning movement, and then that reputation is actually usable by these participants in different use cases. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I'll catch
Yeah,
it.
but
When
I'd
you
love
say
I'd love to pick that up. I'd love to maybe over email post this. We can chat about it, because I would love to include organizations like this in the Genesis Entrepreneur Collective. Like we're actually putting this together right now, and like I said, we're trying to make this as diverse as possible. So it would be exciting to bring in that voice.
Great.
Sure. If you can share, I think I have your email, but if not,
We'll
I'll
share,
catch up with you.
we'll share it. I'll definitely share it before we wrap up this conversation.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Thanks, Mani.
Great.
Thanks so much. Moving on to Monal. Monal, I'm going to bring you up to panelist. Give me a second. Okay.
Yeah, maybe the next few panelists you could also bring on, like whoever you have in mind for the next questions.
Yep.
So that's a quicker. Yeah. Hey, Monal, how you doing? I think you're on mute.
All right.
No,
Can you
baby.
hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey.
Yes.
Hi.
How you
Good
doing?
morning. Doing well. Doing well.
Morning.
Yeah, just the early morning. So yeah, but thanks a lot for that. That was pretty interesting. I really like the idea of sort of building alternate forms of wealth, right? Using distributed economy. I'm just kind of trying to grasp the difference here as compared to sort of the more traditional models which have been in place for the last, let's say, the last decade or so. So, for example, me providing inputs on TripAdvisor, people voting me up, or a Quora saying, this guy has some ability to answer these questions. Or even sort of the more traditional old school models, which is your credit scoring based on aggregation of, your payment, past requests and, your past profile on payments and things like that across the things. So I'm just kind of trying to get a sense of how this is different. Where is the differentiation, or are we, sort of same thing again? Yeah.
That's a good question. So so what we're trying to say is reputations have existed, and they've existed, way longer than money. It's, as whenever, humans are interacting with each other, there is a reputation at play. What we're saying is, in the past, it's needed the institution to be large for that reputation to have any validity, right? So I can only trust, you know, if Monal, you come to me and say you have 1 million followers on Facebook, I'll, look at you with a certain regard. But if I came to you and say, Monal, I have my own social network and I have, all these followers, you're not going to trust that because I could tamper with those ledgers. I could change the rules for following by myself. And so, which is why reputation was, we considered it worthy only if it was a large institution. So obviously, distributed ledgers is changing that, because one of the three of us could get together and, create our own immutable little ledgers. And so long as people respect us, that reputation has validity. So that's change number one, which is, from big to small. And I think distributed ledgers is doing that in general for most things. The big shift is rule number two, which is your TripAdvisor rating, your Airbnb rating, your Uber rating, your good citizen score was restricted within an ecosystem. It could never be ported out. And so, if you were a good Uber driver, it said something about you. But now, when you can plug it into a reputation interchange, it starts having validity outside. And that the network effects for that are tremendously powerful. Think about what happened with barter, 500 years ago or whatever. If you and I, the limitation of barter was you had coconuts, I had rice, someone else had fish, and we were just exchanging these three items with each other. Now, if you gave me coconuts and I didn't have the need for coconuts, I couldn't, there wasn't a liquid enough pool where I could go and, provide these resources and receive benefits. Money played that role because there was this immutable new tool. And so if you gave me $100 instead of coconuts, it was much better for me because now, I can go spend those $100 in a million places. So in the same way, if TripAdvisor offers you a rating, and fine, it has fantastic utility within the ecosystem, that's great. But what if that TripAdvisor rating was also applicable to 50,000 other places? All of a sudden, there's so much more benefit in that TripAdvisor rating. And that's the shift. Like, that is the mindset that we're now starting to see change, because loyalty points like Singapore Airlines, KrisFlyer miles, or TripAdvisor points or Airbnb rating is cute and nice. I don't think of my Uber rating as money, but when it starts getting utility in 50,000 different places, that's when I start thinking about my rating in a slightly different way, and that is the shift that we're talking about. And that's what we say. These network effects will start changing the way we think about reputation as a form of money.
Sure. In case you don't mind, just one quick question, right? So out here, what it seems like, so earlier there were institutions that I can at least kind of go back to and say, hey, you know what, I don't want this part of my reputation to be out there, right? Whether it's Facebook, whether it's a bank, whether it's anything, I can go and say, hey, you know what, I really need this to change. Or maybe, this thing is not recorded right, and here's the proof.
Or maybe Uber might just change the rules. It's recorded on a centralized cloud server, right? So which is why Facebook can say, Monal, we thought what you said was offensive, and so we're going to take away all your followers from you. But now when it sits on a distributed ledger, you have a lot more agency in that, and that's a shift that we're talking about. But yeah, let's take this.
Yeah, we'll take this up
on
offline.
Discussion.
Like over mail or something like that. Yeah.
Pratyush had a very interesting question. So Pratyush, over to you.
I just would love Sid's opinion or views on interoperability. So you talked about network effects in the beginning when you were talking about immutability. I know in the blockchain and DLT world, interoperability is something everyone is looking at.
Yeah.
How do we use our reputation built in one ecosystem and take it everywhere else, especially for small scale entrepreneurs and small scale people? So would love to hear what's happening at SC on that front.
Yeah. I mean, this interoperability is basically built in Sacred Capital through the staking protocol. And so what we say is, if Pratyush tweets out and says, guys, go watch this movie this weekend, it's fantastic. Now, if I hold Pratyush in high regard, I'm going to, follow that recommendation, probably watch that movie. Whereas someone else holds Pratyush in not so great regard, may not follow that. So this staking protocol that we've created, which basically, so for example, if there's a new app called Grab, which wants to create a rideshare platform, imports Uber ratings into its platform. Every user who downloads Grab and creates an account on Grab will be given a choice. Do I want to stake my Uber reputation in Grab? And what does that mean? It means that if I perform well in Grab, it ripples back into my Uber rating. If I perform weak and not so well in Grab, it negatively impacts my reputation in Uber. Did that make sense? And so that reputational fabric, that rippling, allows interoperability from one ecosystem to another.
Can I try and simplify that? So I think
yeah,
since it's very complex way of looking at it, I try and break it down a lot. And
it'd be nice to have
what usually works in most economies is economies of scale, and that's when we know we're going. That's a measure of efficiency, right? Because you've sort of made that effort, and then beyond a point, sort of there is the magnified return on limited effort. Network effects, I think, is the new language that people are basically using for efficiency, which basically means that with limited infrastructure or with limited efforts, the returns that you can get is a lot more. So while you are earning a certain rating with your efforts or your behavior in a certain space, say, let's call it Grab, that can be magnified across sort of spaces. And basically that's what network effects is. The impact of your behavior in one sort of gets affected across the spaces which are more relevant and sort of related to that one particular app. And if behaviors are something that you're looking at, then if say your punctuality behavior on your app in Grab, if that's the template that captures punctuality, is a metric that Grab is evaluating, then any other app which is sort of looking at punctuality as a metric will sort of pull that factor in and reward you in ways. So that's basically what network effects is in this space. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sid.
I think it's good articulation, and good to finally have a woman's voice on this platform.
Okay. Right.
Let's go to the next question. How are we doing on time?
We have we have another 10 minutes for it to close at 1 hour. We're at 9:22 IST, and then we can extend it for 15 more minutes. So over to you, Mihir.
Great. I think he's on mute.
You're on mute, Mihir.
Hey, hi Sid. Hi Nia. Am I audible?
Hey Mihir, how are you doing? Yes.
First of all, thank you for choosing a very convenient time zone for the US.
What time is it there?
So it's 12 midnight right now, almost. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So I just had my economics class today, which is why two economics based questions. So you said that this is not a zero-sum game. So are you essentially saying that the basic law which underlies everything, the law of supply and demand, that necessarily doesn't have to exist in this economy? Like, say, suppose if a Genesis entrepreneur is creating his own tokens, and if he is pulling out those tokens on the Sacred Capital platform, are you saying that if the entrepreneur has the ability to generate more and more reputation, are you saying the supply doesn't have to be limited?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we want to publish, partner with more people and get more academic conversations going on this front, because there have been a few people, pretty senior people in Europe, some people who've been involved in designing of the euro, some people who've been stalwarts on Wall Street who've been thinking about this, and so it'll be great to get a more deeper academic discussion. So post this if you'd like to pick that up. It's something I'd love to do. But fundamentally, that's how reputation works, right? Like, the example that I gave where Jayesh recommends 5 coffee shops to me. He might do it to me. He might go and recommend it to 20 friends. He might go online and tweet it out to a million people. And that's why we say, it's not a zero sum game. So it's fundamentally different from the material economy. And so there is a distinction to be made. And that's why we say reputation can't be bought and sold. Like if you have $5, you can go buy oranges, you can go buy bananas, you can buy a house, you can buy a car, you can buy a football. You can't buy reputation. And so think of this as a parallel economy that will exist. And so even with Sacred Capital, we have our reputation layer. We also have a token layer. And so Sacred Capital tokens aren't connected to reputation. They are basically a function. What is the material imprint of Sacred Capital? It's storage and computation. Ultimately, it's hard drives, right? And so the Sacred Capital token gives the holder utility to access storage and computation on the Sacred Capital network. That's how we've defined it. Whereas reputation is unlinked to this. So yes, in the reputation economy, traditional supply and demand doesn't work the same way. That's why we say it's the staking economy. It's not, the transactional economy. But let's. I mean, there's tons of discussions we can, have on this front. Let's take that post this conversation.
Shariar.
Right. And my second question was.
Sorry.
No,
the
here,
second question was.
Second question.
Essentially, not just regarding to Sacred Capital, but to the idea of new economy in general. You're essentially saying that we do not have, like, governance is defined by people. You don't have a central authority which will essentially come out and say, this is the fiscal policy or this is the monetary policy. But the job of these policies is to ensure that the momentum and the growth keeps on moving in the economy. Who does that job when it comes to the new economy? If the momentum falls down, what do we do?
Well, I think that's fun. That's a philosophical debate between centralization and decentralization. And what distributed ledgers are not saying, hey, there's no chaos and we can now, trust people. What it's saying is information that was shared between people is now non-tamperable. Okay, so I think there's this huge misconception that distributed ledgers is going to allow us to trust one another. I don't think it's about trust. It allows us to share information. Now, if you choose to go forward and make silly decisions in spite of that, I think that those repercussions come to you. So effectively, distributed ledgers allow us a fabric, an immutable fabric where every action, every conversation can get tracked. And with that, if we want to build governance, now you might choose to be part of a community of 4 people, which is perfectly democratic, has 2 parties, has a leader, but it's just 4 people. Now, if those 4 people are fundamentally not aligned with you, you will be really disappointed. And so what we're saying is the distributed economy open sources these opportunities. Now, with open sourcing, there are risks, and we mitigate some of those risks with this reputation fabric that we're creating, because basically everything gets tracked. But yeah, I'd love to address your first question, post this, and go forward.
Right. Yes. I'm shooting an email for sure.
Great. We have a few more questions lined up, so I'm just going to quickly address them. Shariar, you had a question. Would you like me to speak about it, or would you like to sort of ask it yourself? He says can you explain more about Sacred Capital, about how Sacred Capital will allow, for example, an Uber rating to be interchanged, for example, with a TripAdvisor rating? Like, how would you allow for
that? Well, I think like most things in the distributed economy, you can't have a centralized authority that allows or doesn't allow it, because when you create that centralization, it also becomes a limitation in the space. So the founder of TripAdvisor may say, hey, I like Uber's punctuality metric. I'm going to import that into TripAdvisor. Now, there's going to be this tension between the founder of the app and the users of this app. If the users of this app think, wow, that's stupid, why would you import Uber's punctuality into this app? Then users will not subscribe to this. And then the founder actually loses out. So it's almost like, just like an app creator has to design the front end and create a product, in the same way they have to design this reputation economy in a way which will resonate with the users. If it does not resonate with the users, if the users think this is a stupid idea, they will not subscribe to it. And so the number of users subscribing to this helps build the strength of this port. So say TripAdvisor imported this punctuality reputation from Uber and just one person imported it, it's kind of silly, right? Like, and so it won't have validity. But if 1,000 other people that you respect have it, then it has weightage. So you kind of distribute it. You don't allow it or disallow it. You leave it to the app creator in a way. And so that has its risks. You'll see a lot of stuff that is not designed well, but that's just a trade-off of working in the distributed economy. Thanks for the question.
Over to Vishal's question. Vishal, would you like to sort of, has it already answered to your point, or is there more elaboration that you need? You're on mute.
Hi, Sid. Just a quick
hey, Vishal.
Hi. Just a quick follow-up. As a potential Genesis entrepreneur, I love your original thinking, and I think you're one of the few people in the world who are actually, that I can relate to as a person, who's actually doing a lot of work, sort of very original work, and dare I say, fairly advanced work, right? So, as someone who wants to build on top of what you're doing, right? Because we are trying to make this accessible, right? We are not at the deep technical level you're operating at. How do I pay my employees? Because I don't think they really care so much about reputation and all that right now, right? Because it's still not at all to them. How do I motivate my team and get them to commit to a project which may or may not fructify in fiat, right? Which is right now not in fiat. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So as an app creator, you have the choice to continue your traditional economy. Like you could run it in crypto, you could run it in virtual currencies, you could run it in fiat currency. You have the choice. The reputation layer adds on to that. So again, what we're trying to say is this is not a disruption to traditional economics. I think this adds on a layer, and which is why it allows us to capture new kinds of value. So for you as an app creator, you might be a government, you might be a traditional company that's adding on a reputation layer. So your financing could be the traditional equity structure, it could be a tokenized economy. All those options exist. It's a function of what you want to create, and we're happy to chat with you about this. And we want to what our expectations are is that your reputation layer sits on an immutable ledger, and that's important because that ensures that your reputation is not tampered with. And so what we're thinking about is whether we should open that offering to you, or whether you should store it immutably at your end. That's the discussion that we need to have. And so happy to hash out those questions.
Thanks.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Vishal.
I see Michael.
Yes. We have Josh and we have Michael.
Let's go with Michael. Hey, Michael, how are you doing? Let's go with Michael because I know it's late and I'm sure he's trying to hop off. Josh will come to you in a bit.
Okay. I mean, it's been a long week, but basically, it just occurred to me. I guess the thought crossed my mind that if I was imagining a scenario where some people would get really good at providing a certain service or good for society, and they get so good at producing that good that they use it as a hack or just invest pooling all their time and resources into building be producing a greater good as opposed to a singular good. So I'm wondering how much thought you've given to the whole computative aspect of,
Let's take an example of that. Let's say there is a particular like a movement, say a feminist movement that's building a feminist reputation, and that feminist reputation gets so strong and so powerful that it's accepted widely across a million other, communities. And so that becomes like the go-to point. Well, I think those power structures exist, and can form in any kind of new network.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, though, we think distributed economies are not prone for this to be, or let's say they're less susceptible to this because there's no uniformity in design. It's the equivalent of saying, a celebrity, or let's say, Michael, you're an Instagram star and you have 5 million followers. Now, if I come to your Instagram page, just as a random viewer, I'm, I'm not sure that I will follow you just because you have 5 million followers. I will follow you because I might resonate with your content. Like, I genuinely like your stand-up comedy or your makeup tips or whatever. And so that's the way to think about this. Like, you don't, in the distributed economy, you think less for the scale of it, but actually a lot of the benefits I'm getting this, and the benefits might be good comedy or good, conversation, or, benefits within the app. So I think we will see power structures emerge, but they will be, I think, more deserved in that sense. But where right now, as we speak, Akash is on the call. He's one of our distributed economists. We're putting our reputation fabric through some incredible stress tests, and so taking all of these extreme situations and seeing what kind of results occur. So if you'd like to be part of the process, it'd be fantastic, because we'd love to.
Yeah, I can think of those extremes easily. So I'd be happy to.
Yeah. So we've thought of a few. We want to plot them out, see on charts what they kind of look like and what kind of dominance they'll end up having. So that's just one way.
Beautiful.
Manikandan says, please share the email. Yes, Manikandan, we will. We're going to share. We're going to connect. We're going to write, send an email immediately after. But in any case, I'm sid@sacred.capital. And, I think I can see, we're running over time. What I will say is that, watch out for your inboxes, because we're going to share, something special for the first participants, or the participants for first interaction. We're going to share details of our token economy, and the issuance that is coming up in the next few weeks. This one's going to be, we're not doing a public fundraise. It's for people of our community. And so watch out for that in your inbox, is what I'd say.
We have one
more
question. One last question from Josh that's not been answered. And over to you. Do you want me to? Okay, I'm going to start asking it on his behalf. Does Etsy provide authenticity to business ecosystems, which in turn allows end users to use these reputation scores to determine whether to invest in these ecosystems? You could, basically, he says you could even let him know offline. But this is actually quite a relevant question, so why not address that?
Can you explain that a bit? Authenticity in what way? What do you mean?
Josh, are you there?
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey Josh.
Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how is the business model in a way working? Is Sacred Capital in a way an intermediary that connects with various ecosystems or businesses and provides them a reputation score, right, based on the reputational wealth, and this in turn allows the end users, I mean in the way the investors, to use this as a benchmark whether they want to invest in these new ecosystems or businesses?
Well, I think the distinction, yes, I mean, to that question, yes, we are an intermediary, but intermediaries in the distributed economy look very different, because you have a fundamentally more collaborative network kind of economy around it. And like I said, you'll see this in the email. We're going to release the technical paper to you guys, more details about a token economy as well. So watch out for that in the next couple of days. Sacred Capital as an intermediary exists, but we aren't the one issuing these reputations. These app creators, movement creators, entrepreneurs are creating their reputations, and in effect, storing them using our protocol. And so they're stored on distributed ledgers. So you might choose to create a reputation for 3 of your friends, and whether or not that reputation has validity is decided by how many people pick that up and go forward and stake it, and how that ripples forward into other networks as well. So that's the distinction. Obviously, because we're a token economy, there's also business structure around it, and so there is an understanding of people having to use they would need sacred capital credits in order to for the usage of our interchange, and that's how our business works. But like I said, more details on that will be released soon. Yeah, I guess that kind of wraps things up.
Yes, it does. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for being a part of it. We hope it addressed all your questions.
Joining in. Yeah.
Yes, and we will be sending, as Sid said, we'll be setting up a quick follow-up email with details on our token issuance and also more specifics about what we've learned from this particular session. So please do look out for that. And it was a great session. Any specific questions? One more message. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Yeah, so I actually just wanted to say one small thing before wrapping up. This is my sort of small, the way I understand, the way I look at the whole reputation interchange. It's actually quite simple. There are a lot of things that we value. It could be in a group of friends when we're playing a game, or in an organization. So far, it's just been related to metrics, based on how much work you produce, but it could now sort of be layered up into values of, how kind are you, other small things which have not been given a design so far. So you create sort of a reputation template in terms of capturing these values, and the more people sort of adopt it, the wider acceptance it gets. And that's where you can support it. So that's just my understanding of it. And
and I think I'll add on. I'll add on that, Neha. I think thanks for bringing it up. To summarize what Neha was saying, there's Bernard Later, who's credited with the architecture of the euro, explained this as yin and yang wealth. We've created over the last 70 years, capitalism has given us material economy, a way in which to buy stuff. Like you can buy a house, you can buy a car, you can buy different things, you can buy oranges or bananas. And that's fantastic because we've been able to scale value and we've been able to live such, significantly comfortable lives. But other kinds of value, it might be empathy, it might be kindness, it might be how organic your food is, how good, how funny you are, how, good your meme creation skills are, have not found a formal economy. And so as a result, we've not been able to port and scale those. And so what the reputation economy fundamentally does is creates this formal economic language for it so it can scale, and it can scale across networks. And that's this massive shift that we're seeing. And so when we're talking about blockchain distributed ledgers, we're saying tune into this. Of course, the last 2 years we've seen blockchains and crypto allowing us to make faster and more efficient money. But more importantly, we're now seeing how it can create the kinds of money that were missing, or allowing us to validate things that we couldn't earlier. And so I think that's the bigger shift that is underway. And I would say that is what we see value in and what we'd like to chase. And so, I'd like to express my gratitude as well. Thank you for joining. This has been, Neha's brainchild. I've been skeptical about it for about 6 months, but we finally given it shape. And I think, going by how well this interaction went, I think we can definitely do more of these. I think the next one will be more Europe friendly and more East Coast US friendly. So look forward to more fascinating interactions.
Thank you, guys. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day
look out for the
or a good night.
inbox. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.